Nobody expected it to end like this. Samurai Japan returned home not as conquering heroes celebrated by an entire nation, but as a team carrying the weight of scandal, defeat, and internal collapse that had shaken Japanese baseball to its absolute core. The journey back to Japan was quiet. The atmosphere was heavy, and every single person connected to the program knew that what was waiting for them at home was not a celebration but a reckoning. What happened next inside the walls of the NPB emergency meeting has stunned the entire baseball world. Kondo made an announcement that broke the hearts of millions of fans. 3 NPB players received punishments so severe that their professional careers are now permanently over. A new era for Samurai Japan was officially declared with the appointment of a new manager. And then, in a moment that silenced every single person in that room, a letter arrived. A letter from Shohei Ohtani. And what it said has changed Japanese baseball forever. When Samurai Japan's players landed back on Japanese soil, the reception was nothing like any of them had experienced before. In previous tournaments, the team had returned home to scenes of national celebration, massive crowds, and an outpouring of love and pride from the Japanese public. This time was different. This time the mood across the country was one of deep disappointment, confusion, and a hunger for answers that nobody had yet been willing to provide. The players moved through the airport quietly and quickly, avoiding the media as much as possible. There were no smiles. There were no victory poses for cameras. There were no celebratory speeches. Just tired, burdened faces belonging to athletes who knew that the story of what had happened inside their team was about to be told in full whether they were ready for it or not. Sources close to several players described the journey home as one of the most emotionally draining experiences of their professional lives. The physical exhaustion of the tournament was one thing, but the mental and emotional weight of everything that had happened surrounding the internal conflicts, the airport incident, manager Ibata's resignation, and Ohtani's public withdrawal from the WBC was something of an entirely different magnitude. Within hours of the team's return to Japan, the Nippon Professional Baseball Organization announced that an emergency meeting had been called. The announcement was brief and deliberately vague about the specific agenda, but everyone in Japanese baseball understood immediately what it meant. The NPB was not going to allow the events of the past weeks to pass without a full and formal response. The time for answers, accountability, and decisive action had arrived. The emergency meeting was convened at NPB headquarters and attended by the organization's most senior officials, federation representatives, team executives, and independent advisors who had been brought in specifically to provide objective assessment of everything that had occurred. The atmosphere inside the meeting room was described by those present as extraordinarily tense from the very first moment. NPB chairman opened the proceedings with a statement that set the tone for everything that followed. He said that the purpose of the meeting was not to assign blame for the sake of punishment alone, but to conduct a full, honest, and transparent assessment of the failures that had occurred within the Samurai Japan program, and to make the decisive decisions necessary to ensure that those failures could never happen again. He acknowledged that the events of the past weeks had caused enormous damage, not only to the competitive performance of the national team but to the reputation of Japanese baseball as a whole. He stated that the NPB had a responsibility to the millions of fans across Japan and around the world who love and follow the sport to demonstrate that the organization takes its values of integrity, respect, and professional conduct with absolute seriousness. With those words, the meeting moved into its most critical and consequential phase. The first major announcement of the emergency meeting came from a direction that few had anticipated. Kondo, one of the most respected and beloved players in all of Japanese baseball, requested permission to address the assembled officials directly. When he was given the floor, what followed was one of the most emotional moments in recent NPB history. Kondo stood and announced his immediate retirement from professional baseball. His statement was deeply personal and profoundly moving. He began by expressing his gratitude to the NPB, to every team he had represented throughout his career, and to the millions of fans who had supported him from the very beginning of his journey in professional baseball. He spoke about the love he had always carried for the game and about the pride he had felt every single time he stepped onto a baseball field wearing a professional uniform. But Kondo also spoke with remarkable honesty about his experiences during the recent tournament. He described feeling that his best years as a player were behind him and that his performances during the campaign had confirmed something he had privately been wrestling with for some time. He said that he had always promised himself that he would walk away from the game while he still had his dignity fully intact, and that he believed the time to honor that promise had now arrived. Kondo also addressed the broader situation within Samurai Japan directly. He expressed deep sadness about the internal conflicts that had damaged the team and stated that he felt a personal sense of responsibility for not doing more as a senior player to bridge the divisions that had been growing within the squad. He said that experienced players carry a special obligation to protect the unity of a team, and that he wished he had spoken up more forcefully and more directly when he first sensed that something was wrong. When Kondo finished speaking, the room was silent for a long and heavy moment. Several officials and fellow players who were present were visibly emotional. The NPB chairman rose to personally thank Kondo for his extraordinary contribution to Japanese baseball over the course of his magnificent career, and to wish him well in the next chapter of his life. Kondo's retirement sent immediate shockwaves through the Japanese baseball community. Fans flooded social media with tributes and messages of love and gratitude for a player who had given everything to the sport for so many years. Former teammates and rivals alike paid tribute to his class, his skill, and above all his character. But even amid the sadness of his departure, the emergency meeting had much more difficult business still to conduct. With Kondo's retirement formally acknowledged, the NPB chairman turned the meeting's attention to the disciplinary proceedings that had been the most anticipated and most consequential item on the agenda. After weeks of investigation, evidence gathering, and careful deliberation, the organization was ready to deliver its verdicts on the players whose conduct had caused the most serious damage to the Samurai Japan program. The NPB chairman announced that 3 players had been found guilty of conduct seriously unbecoming of professional baseball players and representatives of the Japanese national team. He stated that the evidence gathered during the investigation was comprehensive, clear, and completely damning. He also stated that the severity of the conduct involved left the organization with no choice but to impose the most serious penalties available to them. All 3 players were handed permanent bans from NPB activities, national team participation, and all affiliated baseball organizations. The first 2 players named were Munetaka Murakami and Kazuma Okamoto, whose conduct surrounding the airport confrontation with Shohei Ohtani had already been widely reported and had already resulted in action from Major League Baseball. The NPB chairman stated that the organization's own investigation had fully corroborated the evidence that had been presented to MLB, and that the NPB's permanent ban was being imposed in addition to and completely independent of the MLB's own ruling. The third player named was a significant and unexpected development that sent a fresh wave of shock through everyone present at the meeting. The chairman stated that the investigation had uncovered evidence of a third player who had been actively involved in creating and sustaining the toxic internal atmosphere that had ultimately destroyed the team's unity and contributed directly to the program's failures. This player had not been publicly named in any previous reporting, and the revelation of their identity and their role in the situation added a disturbing new dimension to the entire story. The chairman stated that the identities of all 3 band players would be formally published in an official NPB statement released to the media immediately following the conclusion of the emergency meeting. He emphasized that transparency and accountability were not optional in situations of this severity, and that the Japanese public and the global baseball community deserved to know the full truth. The permanent banning of 3 players in a single disciplinary action is an almost unprecedented event in NPB history. The message being sent by the organization was unmistakably clear. There are values that exist above talent, above reputation, and above any individual player's status within the sport. And when those values are violated, the consequences will be absolute and irreversible. With the disciplinary proceedings concluded, the NPB chairman moved to the forward-looking portion of the emergency meeting. He stated that while accountability for the past was essential, the organization's primary responsibility was now to the future of Japanese baseball and to the millions of fans who still believed in and loved the Samurai Japan program. The chairman announced that a comprehensive reform program for the Samurai Japan structure had been approved and would be implemented immediately. The reforms covered every aspect of the program, from player selection processes and internal communication protocols to mental health support systems, and the management of relationships between NPB-based players and those competing overseas in MLB. He stated that the reform program had been designed with one central and non-negotiable principle at its heart. Every player who represents Japan, regardless of where they play, regardless of how famous they are, and regardless of how much they earn, will be treated with equal dignity and respect within the national team environment. The culture of resentment, jealousy, and internal division that had poisoned the recent campaign would not be tolerated, and the new structural frameworks being put in place were specifically designed to prevent it from ever taking root again. The most eagerly anticipated announcement of the reform declaration was the appointment of a new manager. The chairman confirmed that after extensive consultation with former players, coaches, federation officials, and independent advisors, the NPB had identified and appointed a new leader for the Samurai Japan program. The new manager was described as someone with deep respect across both the NPB and the international baseball community, exceptional experience managing high-pressure environments, and most importantly a proven track record of building genuine team unity and maintaining the kind of positive internal culture that successful national teams require. The appointment was met with cautious but genuine optimism from those present at the meeting. Everyone understood that rebuilding Samurai Japan from its current position would be an enormous challenge. But the sense that the organization was finally taking the necessary steps to address the program's fundamental problems rather than simply papering over them gave many reason to feel that a genuine new beginning was possible. And then everything stopped. A federation official quietly entered the meeting room and approached the NPB chairman with an envelope. The chairman paused the proceedings, looked at the envelope, and his expression changed in a way that immediately captured the attention of everyone present. The room fell silent as he opened the envelope and began to read its contents privately. Those sitting closest to him later described watching his expression shift from curiosity to something much heavier and much more final. The chairman set the letter down, looked up at the assembled officials and representatives, and announced that a letter had been received from Shohei Ohtani. He then read Ohtani's words aloud to the entire room. Ohtani's letter was not long, but every single word carried an enormous weight. He began by acknowledging the reforms being undertaken and stating that he genuinely hoped they would succeed in creating a better environment for future generations of Japanese baseball players. He said that he had deep love for the game and deep love for Japan, and that those feelings would never change regardless of any decision he made about his own participation. But then Ohtani wrote the words that silenced every single person in that room completely. He wrote that after everything he had experienced, everything he had witnessed, and everything he had been forced to carry during and after the recent campaign, he had come to a deeply personal and completely final conclusion. He wrote clearly and without ambiguity that he does not want to be involved with Samurai Japan anymore. He expressed no anger. He expressed no bitterness. His words were calm, measured, and in many ways that made them even more devastating. He said that his love for Japanese baseball would always be part of who he is. But he also said that his love for the game and his love for his country did not require him to continue participating in a program that had caused him so much pain and had so fundamentally failed to protect the values he had always believed in. Ohtani closed his letter by wishing the new manager every possible success and by expressing his hope that the reforms being implemented would truly transform the Samurai Japan program into something worthy of the incredible players and passionate fans that Japanese baseball produces. He thanked everyone who had ever supported him throughout his national team career and said that the memories of his best moments in a Samurai Japan uniform would always remain among the most precious of his entire life. When the chairman finished reading the letter aloud, the silence in the room lasted for a very long time. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The weight of what had just been read hung over every single person present like a storm cloud that showed no signs of passing. Samurai Japan now faces its most challenging and most important rebuilding project in the history of the program. The task ahead is enormous. 3 players have been permanently banned. A beloved veteran has retired. The greatest manager the program had seen in recent years has resigned. And now the greatest player Japanese baseball has ever produced has formally and finally closed the door on his involvement with the national team. The new manager inherits a program that has been shaken to its foundations but that still possesses extraordinary talent and still inspires the passionate support of millions of fans across Japan and around the world. The reforms being implemented give genuine reason for cautious optimism. But optimism must be earned through actions, not words. And the actions required to truly rebuild trust, restore unity, and create a Samurai Japan program worthy of its proud history will demand patience, humility, and absolute commitment from everyone involved. What happened at that NPB emergency meeting will be talked about for decades. Kondo's emotional retirement, 3 permanent bans, a new beginning declared, and Ohtani's devastating letter that reminded everyone of the true and terrible human cost of the failures that had been allowed to occur within the program. Japanese baseball has been given a painful but necessary wake-up call. The question now is whether the sport has the courage, the wisdom, and the genuine commitment to learn from it. Thank you so much for watching. This story has touched the hearts of baseball fans all around the world, and we would love to hear your thoughts and reactions in the comments section below. Please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell right now so you never miss any of the latest and most important stories from the world of baseball.